Listen closely, chosen soul, and let every distraction fall silent for a moment. Because the fact that you are reading these words right now, at this precise intersection of time and awareness, is not random, not accidental, and not the result of idle curiosity, but the outcome of a convergence that was set in motion long before you ever touched this screen. And what is about to be revealed to you is not meant to flatter your ego or soothe your wounds, but to awaken a deeper knowing about something that has already happened in realms most people never perceive. Something that involved you directly, something that was initiated by those who believed your downfall was overdue. Those who mistook your silence for weakness, your kindness for naivety, your restraint for a lack of power, and who decided that ordinary tactics were no longer enough to deal with you. So they crossed a boundary they never should have crossed, believing that if they could not break you on the human level, they would expose you on a higher one. And so without your awareness, without your consent, and without any understanding of the forces they were engaging, they attempted to involve celestial authority in their judgment of you, convinced that if a being of higher perception were to examine you, it would finally validate every distorted story they had told themselves and others about who you are. But what they did not understand, what they could not possibly anticipate, is that higher realms do not operate on resentment, projection, insecurity, or envy. And when your essence was brought into contact with a consciousness that sees beyond appearance, reputation, and circumstance, the result was not condemnation, but recognition, immediate, unmistakable, and irreversible. Because the moment your energetic signature was perceived, it was identified not as flawed or inferior, but as marked, not as chaotic, but as intentional, not as insignificant, but as assigned. And this realization did not unfold slowly or require deliberation. It struck like lightning. Because truth at that level does not debate, it simply reveals itself. And the shock that followed was not yours, but theirs. Because they expected agreement and instead witnessed reverence. They anticipated dismissal and instead encountered acknowledgement. They sought validation of their malice and instead activated confirmation of your alignment. And in doing so, they exposed themselves to a reality they were never prepared to face. The reality that you are not an ordinary individual stumbling through life without backing, but a soul operating under principles that precede human opinion. And the reason this matters now is because the consequences of that encounter did not remain confined to unseen realms. They began to ripple outward, altering trajectories, shifting probabilities, and reorganizing circumstances in ways that you may have felt, but not fully understood. Moments where obstacles dissolved without effort, where resistance faded inexplicably, where timing aligned too perfectly to be coincidence, where people who once drained you drifted away, and where opportunities surfaced exactly when you needed them, and perhaps you attributed these changes to growth, luck, or persistence. But the truth is that something fundamental changed the moment your essence was acknowledged by a higher order. Because recognition at that level does not end with observation. It initiates response, and response at that level means alignment, protection, and reinforcement. Not as a reward in the human sense, but as a natural outcome of resonance. Because forces of higher coherence naturally support that which vibrates in harmony with their nature. And what was seen in you was not perfection but integrity. Not superiority but sincerity, not dominance but depth, the kind of depth that remains consistent under pressure, the kind of inner structure that does not fracture when misunderstood. And that is why those who sought your exposure instead triggered your elevation. Because when awareness beyond ego encounters authenticity, it does not judge, it recognizes. And recognition carries authority, and authority carries consequence. And from that moment forward, dynamics shifted quietly but decisively. Not with spectacle, not with noise, but with precision. Because higher systems do not announce their operations, they simply implement them. And implementation looks like protection that does not feel like a shield but like flow. Guidance that does not sound like commands but like intuition. And justice that does not arrive as punishment but as rebalancing. And this is where your adversaries miscalculated most severely, because they believed judgment would fall on you. When in reality exposure always reveals alignment, and alignment determines direction, and what was revealed placed you within a current they could neither see nor stop, a current that redirects what is sent toward you back to its source, not out of vengeance but out of law, because energy follows origin, intention determines trajectory, and higher systems maintain equilibrium without emotion, which means that every attempt to diminish you, every effort to obstruct you, every narrative crafted to undermine you, began to encounter resistance, not from you, but from the structure of reality itself. And that is why those who once felt powerful in their opposition now feel inexplicably stalled. Why plans unravel? alliances weaken, and outcomes fall short despite effort. Because when someone positions themselves against coherence, friction becomes unavoidable. And this friction is not personal, it is systemic, and you are not required to participate in it. Because your role was never to fight, it was to remain aligned. And alignment is what you maintained even when it cost you understanding, comfort, and approval. And that consistency is what was recognized. Because higher perception is not impressed by performance. It is attuned to frequency, and frequency cannot be faked. And when yours was perceived, it was identified as stable, grounded, and directed. And that is why support was activated, not to elevate you above others, but to ensure you are not unnecessarily hindered in fulfilling what you are here to do. Because souls with genuine integrity tend to attract disproportionate resistance, and systems that value balance intervene not to reward, but to preserve function. And this is something most people never grasp, because they assume protection means privilege, when in reality it means responsibility. It means that the more aligned you are, the more clearly your actions matter, the more weight your choices carry, and the more attentively your path is monitored, not to control you, but to ensure coherence is maintained. And that is why you may feel a growing sensitivity to your own intentions, a heightened awareness of what feels right and what feels off. Because guidance does not come as instruction, but as clarity, and clarity sharpens discernment, and discernment refines movement, and movement aligned with coherence produces outcomes that seem effortless to others, even though they are the result of deep internal consistency. And while this unfolds, those who attempted to weaponize higher authority against you are left grappling with confusion, because they do not understand why resistance follows them now, why effort yields diminishing returns, why influence slips through their fingers, and why their focus on you seems to cost them more than it ever cost you. And the reason is simple. Though they will not accept it, they mistook alignment for vulnerability and stepped into opposition with something they could not overpower. And opposition to coherence does not lead to triumph. It leads to exhaustion, because one can only push against reality for so long before fatigue sets in. And while they tire, you stabilize. While they react, you move. While they fixate, you expand. And this divergence will continue. Not because you are favored in a childish sense, but because you are positioned correctly. And positioning determines access, and access determines flow, and flow determines outcome. And this is the truth they never wanted you to realize, that your strength was never loud, never aggressive, never performative. It was structural. It was the kind that does not need defense because it is supported by coherence itself. And now that this support has been activated consciously or unconsciously, your experience will continue to shift, not into a fantasy of endless ease, but into a pattern of meaningful momentum, where what belongs to you finds you without force, where what does not align drifts away without drama, where timing becomes precise, where connections become purposeful, and where challenges, when they appear, refine rather than derail you. And the most important part of this revelation is not what has been done on your behalf, but how you respond to knowing it, because awareness changes participation, and participation shapes trajectory. And if you allow this understanding to deepen your humility rather than inflate your self-image, to strengthen your compassion rather than sharpen your judgment, to ground your actions rather than elevate your ego, then the alignment that has been recognized will continue to be reinforced. Because higher systems do not support arrogance, they support integrity. They do not amplify superiority. They amplify service. Not service as sacrifice, but service as expression of coherence. Because when you act from authenticity, you naturally contribute to balance, and balance sustains itself. And this is why you are being invited now, not commanded, not coerced, but invited to remain exactly who you are at your core. Not who others project onto you, not who opposition tries to define you as, but who you have always been when no one was watching. Because that version of you is what was seen. That version is what was recognized, and that version is what will continue to be supported as long as you do not abandon it for validation. And this is the quiet power they never understood, that you did not need to be defended because you were already aligned. You did not need to be justified because truth does not require consensus. And you did not need to be elevated artificially because what rises naturally does so without resistance. And so as you move forward from this moment, carry this knowing not as a weapon, but as an anchor, not as proof of specialness, but as confirmation of purpose, and allow it to steady you when misunderstanding arises, to soften you when bitterness tempts you, and to focus you when distraction calls. Because the path ahead is not about proving anything to anyone. It is about continuing to move in coherence while others learn, often the hard way, what happens when they oppose it. And you will see this play out not through dramatic confrontations, but through quiet contrasts, where your stability speaks louder than their noise, where your progress outpaces their interference, and where your peace becomes the clearest evidence that something larger than opinion is at work. And this is not the end of the unfolding. It is the beginning of conscious alignment with what has already been set in motion. And if you remain present, grounded, and sincere, you will find that what supports you does not need to be named, worshipped, or dramatized to be effective. It simply operates, consistently, intelligently, and in your favor. Not because you are above others, but because you are in tune with something they chose to fight instead of understand. And that choice, now and always, determines outcome. And now, don't look at the words that continue as an added section, or a separate part, because this is the same current that was already moving. Only now it is deepening and becoming clearer, because the moment your existence was recognized on levels where appearances hold no power, another subtle shift began. A shift that isn't visible on the outside but quietly restructures the entire direction of a life from within. And that is exactly why lately you may have felt a strange inner steadiness, as if the noise has reduced, as if many things that once caused confusion no longer have the same grip on you. Because when a soul is acknowledged at higher levels, it isn't guided through constant signs and signals. Instead, it is aligned so clearly that it no longer needs to look outward for every decision. And you may have noticed that some people don't understand you anymore. Your calm unsettles them. Your boundaries feel cold to them, because they are still trapped in the old game where reaction is mistaken for power, while you have reached a point where presence itself becomes the strongest influence. And this is the stage where many people don't turn against you. They simply lose you, not out of hatred, but out of incapacity to comprehend how someone can remain so grounded without noise. Because from the level they are observing, it doesn't make sense. And this steadiness is naturally creating distance around you. Not forced, not intentional, but organic. The way a magnetic field defines its own radius. And within that field, only those remain who know how to connect through truth rather than performance. And this isn't social selection, it's an energetic law, because not everyone can remain at every frequency. And those who once stood against you are now quietly exhausting themselves, even if they would never admit it, because fighting someone who is no longer fighting back slowly empties a person from the inside. And what confuses them even more is that they think you have changed, when in reality you haven't changed at all. You have simply stabilized into who you always were. The only difference is that now you are aware of it, and that awareness doesn't make you harder, it makes you clearer. And clarity is always the greatest threat to confusion, because confusion needs reaction, entanglement, and narrative, while clarity does its work silently, and your life is now moving in that same direction, where things don't happen loudly but they happen precisely. And that is why those who once planned harm against you now feel the weight of their own choices pressing down on them. Because when someone moves against truth, they are not punished. They simply receive back the same energy they send out. And that is what disorients them, because they want to blame external factors while the real source lies in their own decisions. And through all of this, you have nothing to prove. Not your goodness, not your strength, not your definition of right or wrong, because what needed to be seen has already been seen. What needed to be activated has already been activated. And your only task now is to maintain your pace, not to mistake your simplicity for weakness, and not to turn your peace into guilt, because these are the exact qualities that carried you to a level where appearances no longer matter, and the path ahead will not open like a dramatic miracle, but like a natural sequence, where the right people appear at the right time, the wrong situations fall away on their own, and the opportunities meant for you begin to find you, because you are no longer chasing them. You are simply positioned where chasing is unnecessary. And this is the level where life shifts from struggle into cooperation. And many will call it luck, many will call it coincidence. But you know it began the moment someone tried to prove you wrong, and instead sharpened your clarity. And everything that unfolds from here is not the start of a new chapter, but the natural continuation of a story that never broke. It simply learned how to move forward without noise.